Thank you very much, Dr. Mahinda, for accepting my invitation. And first of all, I would like to ask a very simple question. I mean, I've seen that in Buddhism there are a lot of ideas and concepts regarding the mind and how we think and about our thoughts. And how do you describe, according to Buddhism, what is our mind and what our thoughts are?
I think the Buddhism, more than any other religious tradition, emphasizes the importance of mind. And there is a famous Buddhist verse in Dhammapada, which it says that, sabba papassa akaranam kusalassa upasampada sacitta pariyodapanam etang buddhana sasana. And what it tried to say is that, this is the teaching of all the Buddhas, and that involves three things. One, not doing negative things, and then second activity is accumulation of the good things, and third one is the refining your mind. And so these three things that Dhammapada verse says, this is the teachings of Buddha. Now they are Sacitta Pariyodapana, that means the word for mind is called in Pali called Chitta, and sometimes it's translated mind. And so the Buddhism says that Buddhist message is basically, on the one part, it's the ethical one, abstaining from negative things and inculcating positive things. And then the third stage comes, the more spiritual one, that you can attain enlightenment by observing your mind and refining your mind, and that meditation become a very important part of it. So that's actually a very distinctive contribution that Buddhism makes to the world, that recognition that we are not just bodies like others. The human beings have minds, and these minds are more subtle and more overwhelmingly controlling us than anything else. So the Buddhism says that if we train the mind, then we can even become enlightened. But if we are not very careful about it, then we become very we come to a difficult situation. So the mind is a very important aspect of the Buddhist tradition, and perhaps the only religious tradition which emphasizes the importance of mind.
Yeah. So, whatever you talk about, is it what Lord Buddha had preached, or is it simply an evolution of the philosophical aspects of Buddhism? Whatever the concepts that you talk about the mind.
The verse or the gatha that I kind of quoted earlier comes from a Buddhist scripture called Dhammapada. And now that text is very old, and even among the Buddhist texts in the Pali canon, Dhammapada is considered as one of the early layers of the Buddha's teaching, because the text itself is in poetry, and so each verse has its story. So this says about the nature of Buddha's transmission, because Buddha taught to people when he encountered them on various occasions. So they are not systematically organized in one place, but they came from time to time. So this verse, no doubt, is very old and comes from very early traditions. So whatever I said earlier, nothing to do with later traditions, very clear from the early part of the Buddhist canon. So nothing modern. It's just actually it's the heart of the Buddhism.
Yeah. What do you personally think what mind could do? Especially, now we are living in the 21st century, and we have seen how the sciences or how the religious concepts have evolved, which talk about mind. How do you personally look at it? What could mind do?
I think we are not still aware of the nature of mind. Because we have a kind of rough idea, or we think that we have a mind, but we are not bothered to refine it, to train it, cultivate it, as Buddhism states. So this is where the difference lies between the Buddha's teachings and how it's adapted by people. And I think there is a general consensus that we have mind, but we haven't really, we are not bothered even to explore it. And the Buddhism says that more exploration you do about the mind, you can know about your identity and your liberation and your progress, and the secret is there. And it is interesting to recognize that Buddhism kind of characterizes mind as a very wild thing. And sometimes it's compared to a monkey, sometimes it's compared to a wild bull. And what does it mean? It means is that very unstable, fragile, changing, and disappearing, appearing, distracting. And so the mind is characterized as a kind of an obstacle for your success, an obstacle that you can take away from the whatever good you can have. So the text is, the Dhammapada itself has many verses. It says that if you wanted to, you don't need an enemy. Your enemy could be your mind. So basically it says that if your mind is badly motivated, negatively motivated, it brings the failure. It brings your distraction.
Yeah. So does that mean the external factors could affect us, could affect our mind?
Yeah.
Is that what it means?
I think yes, because usually Buddhism says that when we are born, our mind or our consciousness is very illuminated, is pure. And this is actually shared by most Buddhist traditions, that like the babies when they are born, they are quite innocent because their mind is pure. So the Buddhism says that our original mind is very pure. But when we grow up, we have five senses, and these five senses in the Buddhist tradition includes eye, ear, nose, body, and the mind. And these are the ways that we accumulate knowledge, accumulate various experiences. And once they come from outside, they color the mind. And so our character changes, whether we could be a good person, neutral person, or bad person. So all these things processing this external information. So the mind has the capacity to kind of digest them and shape it. So it's very much influenced who the person is. So the mind is originally illuminated. With the contact with the external world, get distorted or colored or shaped.
So, I mean, can we influence the others? How do you look at it? For an example, now you said our mind should be taught, it should be trained. So it's just a muscle which should be trained. I mean, it's just like a child. That itself shows that we could influence it. We could make it better. We could make it worse. So, I mean, there is the aspect of that we could persuade our mind, persuade others' mind, isn't it? I mean, how do you?
I think the Buddhist idea is that mind is much more powerful than your body. So Buddhism recognizes there are two things: one, the mind, and your body. And Buddhism says that actually your mind is much more subtle than your body. But if you can understand the nature of mind, you can have a better life. So you can organize your life better by understanding the nature of mind So when we say we kind of refine the mind, what we mean is that we use that mind to organize our body. So that's what it means. So kind of more integration. So basically the Buddhist path is tend to be kind of integration of this mind and body, so that there is a kind of more wholesome person in it. And now when you think about whether you can persuade someone, I think you have to do it through your mind rather than with the body. So if you're thinking, the way you think can be changed, then definitely you can persuade people. But Buddhism doesn't encourage us to study mind or refine mind in order to persuade people. No, that's not the aim. The Buddhist aim is basically to study the nature of mind so that you become a better person, more integration, and you can understand things more clearly. And there, it's not like a brainwashing, kind of somebody manipulation.
How do we segregate it? I mean, how do we define the difference between now basically what we see is like, even in the religions today, they try to persuade us maybe to do good. I mean, that's the just as a layperson, that's what we see. I mean, it encourages us, or maybe through prayers or through gathas or whatever the text that the religions have, they ultimately influence or have impact on us to be good, to realize ourselves, or maybe to get certain enlightenment.
Yeah, that's very much, I think, any philosophy, any ideology, any worldview have a conception of personhood. Kind of idea that all of these promise that there is a better way of doing things. And also all of these ideologies or philosophies tend to say that, the human beings can be better than they are now. So there are aspirations of being a better human. What you call in philosophy, we call it flourishment. How you become a flourished human being. And now the Buddhist way of thinking, the Buddhist analysis of the mind, and Buddhist emphasis on the refinement mind can be taught in that light. So the Buddhist conception of how you make your life as a human being better, how you achieve the purpose of your life as a human being. That's the purpose. So now when you take that position that it's possible to make your life better, and there's a way to do it, and then there is a persuasion. There's a persuasion say that, like for example, even in the first verse that I cited today, abstaining from negative things and accumulation of the good things. This is kind of more ethical life. So there is definitely, if you can use that word persuasion, there is a persuasion there that there are certain things in the world which is unwholesome, unskillful, you should avoid them. Like for example, you could say killing any living being, not taking other people's lives, not stealing, not lying, and these kind of basic things, Buddhism would say that's a negative thing. So they encourage people to be more truthful, they encourage people to be more loving, and they encourage people to be more caring, and they encourage people to protect others. And these are kind of certain good values. So the Buddhism if we can use that term persuasion, and then mind training definitely encourage that kind of world vision, kind of abstaining from violence, and abstaining from telling lies and speaking truth and so on. These are things that encourage, kind of encourage people to speak truth.
Are there any techniques or tools involved in training our mind according to Buddhism? In Buddhism,
Very much. I think that whatever we call it Buddhism is actually kind of collection of toolbox, and the technique for the training of mind is meditation. So the meditation is the basic technique. So the meditation, what you do is you're not controlling the mind, but you understand that there is something going on inside you, and that mind is so vulnerable, it travels. And so bringing that mind into a more calm situation where it integrates with your activity that you're doing, that's what it is. So basically an observation of the nature of mind rather than controlling the mind, and see how mind is so powerful than your body, and then being able to harmonize that whatever you do, day-to-day activities or religious activities, or kind of more integration. That's what Buddhism tries to do. The meditation is the technique.
I've heard that what Lord Buddha had said. It seems that not to translate his gathas or whatever he had preached. Is that true? Do you know anything about it? Is that it's no, just an idea?
Buddha has not prohibited translating anything. So he actually said that what he did was that he was not willing using Sanskrit for his teaching. So he encouraged people to use the local languages.
Mm-hmm.
So Buddha says that everybody should preach my teaching in his or her own language. So that's the Buddhism says. Buddha didn't prohibit translation.
So rather than making it a mantra, so what he wanted was kind of a self-realization, true understanding.
I think maybe I don't know whether I understand your question correctly. There are two aspects here. I think one is about the issue of the language, whether we should translate the Buddhist scriptures to another language. Mm-hmm. And the Buddha is very much into that idea that everybody can integrate the Buddhist teachings to one's own lifestyle, and that means translation is possible. And second idea is that there's nothing gained by repeating words without understanding. So Buddhism is very much say that it's very important that you understand rather than chant things like a parrot.
Yeah,
so if that's what you meant, then Buddhism is very much say the meaning behind the word is very important, and action on that understanding is very much important. So just repeating whatever heard is not important.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use that mantra in that sense.
That's right. Now there is the thing called the hypnotism and religious persuasion. Do they go in parallel lines? In hypnotism we also try to get the control of the mind of the other individual. In religions also there is a kind of we try to get them to believe or get them to realize what we are trying to say. How do you look at it? Is it?
I have not done any hypnotism, so I am not an expert in that area. But I assume that in hypnotism, what it does is that probably it reaches to your subconscious level and bring up that subconscious level feelings or situations or memories, and I guess that's what's happening. And so I'm not able to comment on that part, but in terms of persuasion, I think persuasion goes on everywhere, and I think hypnotism probably doesn't try to persuade you, but what probably hypnotism does is that kind of recover some of the memories that hidden there. So the persuasion, I think, goes there every day, all the time, and I think from the birth until our death, we are always persuaded. Perhaps we are persuaded by our parents in the first instance, in the family, in school, in the society, workplace, in mass media and so on. So we are persuaded to do various things. But persuasion is a natural thing. Persuasion is actually, education itself is a persuasion. It's very important role that I think that Aristotle calls is habit. Kind of habit. Habit is kind of more kind of customs and things like that. And education as an important part of being ethical. The habit comes from education. So education is an important strategy of persuasion. And maybe the marketing and other mass media is a kind of expansion of it. But I think even to become religious is a way of persuasion, because unless you are born into a religion, if you accept a new...
In the modern day, they use sciences like neuroscience or in psychological methods to persuade others. I mean, for an example, as I told you, in music videos, like Gangnam, for an example, the Gangnam Style, they have hit 1,000 views within a short period of time. We do not understand the language, but still we are persuaded to watch. I mean, for in the other sense, like election campaigns, they use these aspects of psychology, neuroscience to get to persuade us, basically. So will this pragmatic sciences will it unravel the mechanism in the mind? I mean, for an example, what Lord Buddha said was, yes, we should train it. I mean, that itself shows that there is kind of a mechanism which could be trained. That if somebody could unravel the mystery behind it, I mean, that's what the sciences are trying to do. What do you personally think? Can they do that?
I think, the sciences usually do it with testing. And so they will do it in a more evidence-based system. And whereas religious teachers also do a testing, but definitely not on evidence based, like meditation. It's more experiential, and so each person will know what happens subjectively, and it won't be won't be able to illustrate it. So in that way, science, I think we tend to kind of believe that science gives a better way of understanding the process. And definitely, I think science can help us to understand the broader picture of the nature of the mind, kind of how it relates to physical body and how, kind of how it's constituted, whether it's just the brain or something else, or kind of a little bit more complex understanding. But the beauty is that if Buddhism basically says that our mind is more powerful than the body. And the mind is the most important one. And whenever you think, speak, and do things, and all are mind-made, that's what Buddha says. It's called Mano Pubbangama. That's the first verse in the Dhammapada. That means that everything is mind-made. So the Buddhism makes a powerful argument that mind is more powerful than anything else, so that it should be guarded and protected and refined and polished in order to understand the purpose of being human or to attain enlightenment. Now the science, I think,
they use it in a very business-oriented way to understand it, so that they could, there is huge competition among business entities. So they try to use these sciences to get the consumer to buy their goods and services. And unraveling the mind in this scenario, which would lead to very specific results. And
I think they have the. I mean, if you kind of try to explain the situation, the relationship with mind study with the market world, the idea is basically we are kind of directing towards a profit idea.
Yeah.
That, if you can encourage consumers to buy or use certain gadgets or things, then there's a quick sales and you can make enough profit. And now here, if you think about it, it's not a religious mission. It's just very, very mundane, this worldly, pragmatic strategy of making a business. Now here, interesting thing is that in that enterprise, they understand the weakness that human beings have, like a desire, kind of need, want, and aspiration. So now these are the things that promote the business or the
yeah, exactly. I mean, according to Lord Buddha, he talks about moha, asha, our needs, our excessive unsatisfaction within us. We are trying to fill ourselves. So this science has tried to unravel this scientifically, very, very in a very methodical sense, and try to fill it with some not with spiritual stuff, but with the other material.
I think we could call it the science enthusiasm of mind. It's come from a very basic fundamental conviction that we have to understand humans. Science comes with a very noble aim, I think. The neuroscience want to unravel the mystery about the humans. And so they are actually the aim, in terms of the aim, the science aim, the Buddhism's aim is not different. Because the Buddhist aims is basically to understand, how we make better human being religiously and how we attain enlightenment. And whereas the science wants to say that we are humans and we wanted to understand how humans behave and how humans develop, or the secret of being human. So the aim is similar, but what is different is how the understanding is used in business or in religion. In the Buddhist case, it would say that the negative things, aspirations and the illusions and the greed, Buddhism would say they are the problems. Human beings enter into problem because of these very facts of these desires. Whereas the science would say yes, they will also explain it, but they won't have the same principle. Would say that they are completely negative. Science would say it's a kind of more biological, it's kind of intrinsic, or these are very basic to being human, or something like that. And they won't make any claim that you will attain enlightenment or something. Science wouldn't do it. But for the business people, knowing how the mind works is beneficial for them, then they can manipulate them. So these negative desires and the weaknesses can be a good strategies for business to manipulate and sell and even to use the minds as a mob, kind of, rather than fighting a war outside with weapons and so on, you can fight a war through your mind. So it's kind of very, very interesting. I think these three things, religion, Buddhism as a religion, science as a evidence-based discipline, and business as or marketing as profit-making or kind of business enterprise. They all have different goals and different aims and different results, and all of these are concerned about mind because mind is more powerful. Mind is more influential and can be persuaded, but they do it for completely different reasons. Whereas the Buddhism and science will look at it as to understand the human, whereas the business will do it only for pragmatic reasons of having more profits or businesses or enterprises or whatever.
Will this, now, will this sciences blank our rational aspect? Will it be able to like basically wipe out our rational aspect, our reasoning?
I think the foundation of science is reason, because foundation of science is not emotions, but I think science recognizes the power of the emotions, power of the emotions and what kind of impact it is. So the science is, I wouldn't say science is irrational, and science cannot be irrational. Science is very much reason-based one, evidence-based one. But what science does is recognize the power of emotions. That's what I think neuroscience bring in, like Freud and others brought that wealth of information that there are a lot of emotions, the kind of fire inside the human beings. In Buddhist terms, it says they are kind of defilements. That's the word in the Buddhism. We can all this called defilements or glacier, and Buddhists would say that they are kind of dormant underneath your mind, and when the stimulus comes, they arise like fire. So the Buddhist part has been to kind of understand them before they explode, and to kind of harmonize them and cultivate them so they do not produce negative results. Now, like if you think about psychology and neuroscience, probably science is trying to do that in a more clinical way, like identify diseases and so on, the link between the mind and the body and disease, and the this kind of comes basically from Freudian ideas, I think, originally, like unconscious mind and beneath. So there is kind of the purpose seems to be quite to make human beings more healthier. So I won't say science is irrational or without reason. The foundation of science is very much reason, but it won't unravel the mystery of who we are and how we are behaving in a certain way and what directs us. And probably they recognize mind as the kind of depository of all these habit patterns.
According to Buddhism, it says, our psyche is dominated by fantasies and endless needs. So, will this modern advertising, now they use this excessive use of persuasion, and so we feel like buying stuff, but we do not have money. So will this lead to, again now, sort of despair, unsatisfaction, unrest within us? In short, it is like directing us more towards the klesha, more whatever the certain the lack of material world, again it creates us. So
yeah. I think the modern world and our lifestyle and our aspiration is very much it's a kind of carnival of desires. And we are actually just kind of puppets in that. And now there are a lot of factors why we became like that. I think emails, internet, the films, and all sorts of things, and computers, mobile phones, and all of these things. They're very useful, but they have made available that it has opened up our wild desires. It's like snakes coming out of a basket, it's all coming out. And now what you could see is actually release of emotion, release of desires is what we see here. And that could be quite dangerous for human person, because not only that economically you could call it that people do not have money, and because of that they will get despair, but there is also a spiritual side of it too, because you will go to the extent of compromise in whatever values you have. You won't forget that you have parents, you would forget that you have sisters and brothers, and you will forget that you have duties and responsibilities, and you will forget that there are things to be preserved for the next generation, and you will come to a stage of betraying everything because you are deluded with your aspirations and you cannot make right decision, and you will lose sight of the spiritual well-being of yourself and others. And that's the danger of it. And now the Buddha, when he talked about the notion of dukkha as one of the fundamental key concepts, he identified this problem. And when he called dukkha, it's actually the friction between the real world and the imaginary world. The real world is actually always have a conflict, your desires and what you can gain and limitation and so on. So the modern media has released your all emotions, but actually you don't have enough resources to fill them. So there is a lot of pain here, dukkha here. And so the Buddhist teachings are equally available today, more than in the Buddha's time today, because we can talk about a lot of dukkha here in a very pragmatic and very serious way. I mean, think about for a moment for a kid, for 10 years to 18 years old. I mean, so many things that kids could do. But I mean, look about most of the kids. They're always on the mobile phone, even when they are walking, even when they are talking with their friends, even when they are on the lectures. They are always on the mobile phone. What it does, it distracts them. It distracts them what they are doing. They are not educated, they are not listening to anybody, they are not even enjoying the company with their friend. And this is where the Buddha explained the suffering. Because you have this beautiful life that you can enjoy, you can go running, you can enjoy the nature, you can have friends and so on. It's all taken out by these new devices which increases their desires. And so this is very destructive. There's a lot of suffering. And it's very much actually modern age kind of comes to Buddhist notion of the suffering more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, do you think now institutions such as government should regulate advertisements? Now, for an example, in the case of neuromarketing, they use these aspects of psychology to persuade us to buy goods and services. So this has led us to this could lead us to certain aspects. I mean, for despair or unsatisfaction. Now, in China, we saw an example where a young boy, he sold his kidney to buy an iPad. So now, do you think? What do you personally think? Should the government regulate the excessive advertising? Now, for an example, if they use neuromarketing or this excessive advertising in the case of alcohol or tobacco products, now of course they are being banned in most of the countries. So this could lead to so many other social issues. So
I think this is a very important one. The one that you are raising, whether the government as a powerful instrument should come and control it. This is a very interesting issue. On the one hand, you see that government should do, but on the other hand, say government shouldn't do, because it depends on the perspective. And why government should do, if you argue for it, is because they have more power to do it, and the government is supposed to protect people. And that's one way of saying it. And if you say that government shouldn't do, then we allow people to operate more liberally and free. And now the case that you raised about this iPad, buying an iPad by selling the kidney, and this actually, not just because of the iPad is popular, this is quite common in many developing countries. A lot of people in the industrialized world, go to developing countries to get kidneys and other things. And this is the kind of very, in a way, it's the kind of exploitation by the developing world on the poor nations, and that's quite common. That's one side of it. But I think there is a kind of fundamental ethical issue here. Ethical issue is whether the neuroscience-based marketing is prohibited or not. It's actually ethical issue. Ethical issue is whether people should be exploited. That's the fundamental issue. Whether the people should be exploited, and now it is all right for the governments to control or to manage these devices on an ethical ground, saying that whatever these mechanisms are unhealthy for a large segment of the population. It doesn't help the well-being. So educating the marketing people on ethical grounds would be more useful rather than legalistically banning them. Because I think educational part is the more important one. So the kind of opening up the damage that they do to the people, and the grounds of manipulation, exploitation that goes on to use vulnerable people. Like the Chinese man's case is the vulnerable case, because why I call vulnerable, he's poor. He doesn't have economic resources. But because his desires are exploding, he resorted to a very unusual act of selling his kidney to get an electronic device. So this is a kind of, I would call him a vulnerable group. So I think the responsibility comes in the business, science and the neuroscience, and the government is protecting vulnerable groups. That's the issue, I think. Protecting vulnerable groups is the issue, and it's an ethical issue. It's an ethical issue of any civilized government to take care of it. I wouldn't say you could control it just by the laws, but more showing the ethical side of it. Kind of these new technology, new scientific design can be harmful to human beings or human civilization. And also it may be a matter of power. Of grabbing the vulnerable groups in an unhealthy way.
Yeah. Now we've seen, the brands such as Apple have gained a sort of a very strong attachment with the consumer. It has gone so far that some people started, thinking it as a religion. Now in the religion, we have seen we have a certain devotion towards it. We try to defend it. We try to follow its precepts, and we basically live in the religion. But in the case of brands today, such as Apple, people do the same. If new Apple phone is coming out, people queue day and night, and then once they bought it, they basically love it. And do you think now religion's being replaced by the modern consumerism?
I don't think so. I don't think that religion is replaced, because this desire to acquire new things it's a part of us. And also actually these new productions are harmless because they are very useful, like mobile phones or